It's so funny the way Brian introduced me because my focus on audience engagement began during a year-long fellowship here at RJI. I was an editor at the Columbia Missourian newspaper across the street and a faculty member. And I spent a year as a fellow here, and I was interviewing dozens of journalists all over the place about what is this thing called audience engagement? What does that mean? And I thought I was getting it all down. And then a few months into the fellowship, I went and spent a day at the Gasconade County Republican. And Dave Marner, I don't know if you guys know Dave. He's not here right now. He's not here. I would know if Dave were here. And I asked all these questions, and I realized that so many of these things that bigger news organizations were telling me they wanted in terms of their relationship with their community, he's like, oh, well, yeah, like, why would I focus on that? That's just what journalism looks like here. So the idea that you would know who you're serving and how you're doing that, and like have a connection about, like, kind of know what's important to people. There's a relationship that's possible in smaller communities where you really are still a part of the community, not this separate, transient thing that stands apart from community. That I, as someone who's worked in mostly in larger newsrooms, really envy. And that as I remember when I was talking to Dave all those years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, he was saying, I feel really good about what I have going on right now. The question is, what's going to happen with their kids? How does this relationship I have with my community adapt to different generations, different news needs, different news consumption habits, and that sort of thing? So we are here today to talk about social and digital and how we evolve. And I want to, too often when we talk about social media, I don't want to talk to you about tools today. I want to talk to you about philosophy and attitudes and questions we ask that can make our journalism more social. So too often when we talk about social media, we mean like, let's be sure to post our links on Facebook, which is really important to do. Facebook can, take you into people's living rooms any time of day. But being social for me doesn't start with setting up the right accounts on social platforms. It starts with knowing what that even means and why we want to be social. And for me, being social is about meeting people where they are and listening as well as talking. So what does it actually mean to be social? So I like to approach this question by picturing yourself as a human being at a party and what it means to behave in a social manner at that party as opposed to I don't know, is it antisocial or asocial? I'm not really sure. You know what I mean though? Like if you're behaving at a good social, like conversational style at a party. So what are you doing? Shout out some things. If you're behaving in a social way at a party, what does that look like? Talking. Talking's really good. Very helpful first step. What else? Listening is such a good other end of the talking spectrum, right? So you're talking and you're listening, which can sometimes look like just taking turns talking. And that's not always really fun. What else are you doing? Smiling. Maybe giving some feedback. Like, oh, what you just said was meant to be funny, so I'm going to smile here whether or not it was funny. Randy, you're funny. Not everybody's funny, but you're going to like look and, acknowledge what people say. You're going to reflect back what you hear. What's that? Drinking. Maybe not as applicable for what I'm going for, but absolutely an important part of all party behavior. What else? You're relaxed. Yep, totally. You're having fun. You're absorbing. Observing. Ooh, observing, right. So being social is going to look different at a Chamber of Commerce meeting and a PTA meeting, right? So you're observing enough about the situation to know what your behavior should look like to be authentically social in that situation. You're still you, like, right? I'm still Joy when I'm talking to my mom friends and when I'm presenting to a big newsroom. But I know what's going to resonate best with each group, and I know what version of myself might be most appropriate and most effective, and what's going to make people laugh at my jokes. So what if no one's laughing at your jokes? What if you're at a party? What do you do if you're at a party and you're telling a story and you just like see people glaze over? What do you do? Hightail it out of there because these are clearly not your people. That would be a totally valid option. What if you kind of want to stay and do better? Get them, get them a second drink, because then they'll really think you're funny. Okay, work with me, folks. Anything else? You quit talking? Change it up. Maybe you just hang back and listen for a bit. Maybe you quit talking and go back to observing. Maybe you change it up, right? So like, I'm going to tell stories about my kids because I think they're super funny. Maybe it's not the best situation for that, and I get the sense that people are really not into my kid stories. And so I'm going to switch gears, right? I'm going to talk about my travel or my dog, or I'll try something else. So if you sense that people are not into what you're doing, you adjust what you're doing based on that feedback. That's an important part of being social. Otherwise, you're just talking and then shutting up for a while because you can tell someone else wants to talk. Don't you hate those conversations where you can tell that someone's just waiting for their turn to talk and not really listening? That's not really social behavior. It's a really bad date. So if you behave as if you're dating and as if you care what impression you're making, then being social, work with me, this will get back to journalism eventually. What you're doing is figuring out what version of yourself is most appropriate for what situation, sharing what you have to offer in a way that's going to resonate, paying attention to whether it is resonating. I was so sure that was going to be funny. Let's see if it is. And then adjusting what you're doing based on what you're getting back. That's what it looks like to be social for me. So what that means for journalism is, who are the people you're serving? What do they need from you? What do you have to offer that is a good match with what they want? So again, think about dating. It's not that all of you is wrong or right. It's that of the person you're talking to, where do you find the happy overlap? Where do you figure out what you have to offer that's going to make sense for the people you're trying to reach? And those people you're trying to reach are going to be different for your government coverage and your prep sports coverage. But are you doing it in a way that's going to make them feel like they're in a happy relationship with you? Not like you're sort of tone deaf to what they're up to, which is what happens when you bluster your way into a party and behave in a way that's not consistent with the mood of the group. Unless you're just drinking enough that it really doesn't matter. Okay, so next question. So first question that makes journalism more social is, what does that even mean to be social? After this, I'm going to put you to work, just so you know. Okay, so second question is, where do ideas come from? So you all have your routines to figure out, I'm guessing, and I really can't wait to hear more about them, to figure out what's important to the people you cover. Where in your community are people talking about community life? And where's the opportunity there for you to be listening? Whether that's in informal conversations with your neighbors or eavesdropping in a coffee shop when you're pretending to read, because that's when you get your best ideas, right? So how are you approachable? How are you asking people to help set your agenda? In terms of where your ideas come from, we all have ideas based on our own routines as journalists, our professionalism that says when this happens, it necessitates this sort of coverage. This is newsworthy, this is not newsworthy. Then we have the ideas that come up because of our lives. Like, I drive by this all the time. Please tell me this happens in your newsrooms too. It definitely happens in mine, where it's like, oh, we should write about that because it's on the route of the editor's like route to work, right? So all of a sudden it's super important. Well, did you know it's happening across town too? We just don't happen to live there. Or this thing is important because it's inconvenient for me, or it's inconvenient for my neighbor, or I know that this story did really well because my neighbor told me that it mattered in a way that made me happy. What about the people you are not in regular contact with? In terms of ideas, are you accessible to a whole bunch of people in your community? Is it easy for people who don't already have your phone number or make a habit of stopping by the office to say, you know what, I'd like to see my life reflected in this way? Is that something they think about? What are the ways that you invite people to get in touch with you and help shape what you're doing? How are you inviting participation in what you're doing? So ideas come from our lives, but one of the beauties of social media is how easy it can be to sort of listen in on what's happening in other people's lives, to make sure that your coverage is as reflective of the full life of the community as it can be. So, first job for you guys. Are you ready? You need paper and pen. I'm not kidding, I'm watching. Paper and pen. And here's what I want you to do. I would like you to make a list, and then you're going to talk to a friend, and then I'm going to ask you to share some highlights. You're going to make a list of where in your community people talk to each other about what's going on. And I want you to have 2 columns. One column for offline, where physically do people meet to talk about what's going on in their community, and where online do people talk to each other about what's going on in their community. So take 5 minutes, make a list, and then find someone else to talk to about your list. And then we'll report back. Okay, you guys ready to report back? The question on the table is, where do people in your community talk about what's going on in the community? Online and offline. So go ahead and shout out what you wrote down or what you heard from your conversation partner. Hope you're being nice and social as you chatted. And I will repeat it back so that it makes it on the video instead of passing a mic around. The lumberyard. That's awesome. I'm just going to take some notes because you guys are really smart. Okay. Okay. On your website? The school website. There are comments on the school website? No way. Oh, sure. Yeah, like, so the school website is a window into what's happening in the schools. Are people talking to each other about it there or just consuming? They can actually comment. They can comment. That's fascinating. Okay. What else? Churches. Sports. Like youth sports, high school sports, all of it. You go there a lot, do you? Uh-huh. What about the barber shop? Oh, it's one. I'm sorry. It's one and the same. Gender neutral haircutting. Okay. The gym. Good one. Coffee shops. Bars. We know you're a drinking crowd already. We got that down. Bars. Right. Community events. Yeah? Like what?
In our area, we have like a third Thursday, which is downtown every third Thursday. They have, small events from outside.
Kind of cultural events? Totally. Mm-hmm. Keep going. Oh, I was supposed to be repeating them back. I'm sorry. Chamber functions, the post office, public cultural events, bars, coffee shops, gym, beauty shop. Church, grocery store, totally. Whoops. Courthouse. Neighbors. Neighbors, funerals. Hopefully not together. Work. Yes, we do, don't we? Trib talk.
Anywhere you stand in line.
Yes, standing in line. Okay. Other places online? No, not yet, sir. Are people in your communities talking about their community life on Facebook? Okay, are they doing that in like groups or on specific pages or just with their friends? All of it. Okay. I moved away from Columbia last summer, and I was still practicing journalism in town, and when I stopped actually covering news in Columbia, I think I quit like 50 Facebook groups because there are so many specific to specific interests, like reptile lovers of mid-Missouri. I'm not kidding. And I got crazy story ideas from just joining groups and eavesdropping what people were talking about. Facebook. Did somebody say Twitter? Yes. Okay, so how do you know who locally is on Twitter? How do you know that? Is Twitter a thing for all of you? I wouldn't think so. Who's Twitter a thing for? Kids. Sure. Schools, so like official accounts in the area, absolutely. Politicians. So it's a broadcast device for sort of people who might send press releases, right? Absolutely. So can be an effective way to listen. What about regular people talking to each other? Does that happen on Twitter? Are people in your communities discussing community life with each other on Twitter? Yeah. And it's harder to find. Not everybody, even on Twitter, says where they are. So making a list of people in your community who talk a lot on Twitter can even be challenging sometimes. Okay. How about that? You're the first person to say that too. Is that true anywhere else? Newspaper comment sections as a place online that people are discussing the community life? All right. Some nice validation there. What about Instagram? Anyone?
Online forums.
Online discussion forums? Hosted by who?
Our newspaper hosts one.
Okay.
There's another one.
Okay. What about Instagram? Is that a reflection of life in the community for you guys or not? Yes. Some? If you're under 18. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Instagram can be a nice window into what a certain demographic is talking about. Okay. Good. Thank you. Keep those lists handy. I'm going to talk for a bit. Then it's your turn again, okay? So, think about the people who are talking in all of those places. And what is the path for the journalism that you are offering your community becoming a part of those conversations? You can hope and trust that people consume your content and want to tell other people about it, and that your content reflects public conversation that's happening. And you can hope that people go to church on Sunday talking about something you did, or standing in line at the grocery store say, hey, did you see that? Or that your content is helping inform community conversations. The tricky thing is that as people get information in lots of new ways, you can't count on that. In terms of, hang on a second here. I got out of order. I was writing on my keyboard, and so I advanced slides without. Okay, so here we go. Where does a story begin and end? So the life of a community story begins in line at the grocery store, or begins in a conversation at church, or begins in the stands at the football game. When we talk about a story, a journalism product, we think about the time from when a reporter has an idea until the time something gets published. The life cycle of that story, though, is much broader. The life cycle of the story and the life of a community beyond the specific journalism product. It's not like if you didn't cover something, it's not a community story, right? Like our coverage of something is a little chapter in the life of something much larger. So for me, part of what being social means as a journalist is expanding that life cycle. So what happens when journalists get an idea? Journalists are used to talking about what they're doing with each other, finding some sources, putting together a product, publishing the product. And then when journalists publish a product, what do they do next? If you finish a story, if you spend all day working on a story and you hit publish on your story, what do you do next? Besides drink. You go on to the next story, right? Except for everyone except you and your sources, the life cycle of that story is just beginning of the product, right? So for the rest of the community, they're like, here's this thing. And we've already moved on. So for me, part of being social is figuring out how to invite the public in sooner. How do you share with people what you're working on? Like, how hard is that? What if you had a little box on the front page that said stories in the work for next week, here's how to weigh in? What if at the end of a story, a reporter said, here are the next few ideas I'm kicking around. What questions do you want me to ask? Who do you want me to talk to? What if you did a 30-second video? Hey, thanks for reading. Here's my Tuesday. Here's what's going on in the newsroom. The newsroom, I live in Sarasota, Florida now, and the newsroom there, the Herald Tribune, is using Facebook Live that way. They do really quick little videos from, we're going to talk to 3 reporters about what they're working on today. Really quick and easy. And because it's social, not going on the website, the expectation for sort of polished video is different. It's fine if you were standing there waiting while someone stands up and someone else sits down. If they sneeze in the middle, you sort of feel like you're in the newsroom with them. Not like, here's the video we're producing today, and I put on a jacket because I'm on camera. So there are lots of ways on social to be more informal and to invite people to help shape what you're doing. What about offline? Are you, in terms of listening where people are, is there anything at the gym? Could you put a box at the front counter at the gym that says, got an idea for the newspaper? Drop it in here. Could you, my newsroom here in Columbia did that for a while. We had a dozen boxes that had a form on it that said, what should the paper be covering? And we put them at gyms and churches and laundromats and all over town, and then went around and checked them once a week. Some of the tips were so funny, like, Columbia has a drinking problem. Those students on Friday nights in the middle of the night, something's got to be done about that. Like, okay, buddy. Got a lot of alcohol in this talk today, isn't there? So offline and online, are you where people are, and are you looking for ways to invite people into your process, whether it's shaping your agenda in general, helping you decide what to cover, or saying, here is what we're working on. We want to hear from people who have opinions about this. What are you afraid will screw up? What perspective are we going to overlook? And then what's the next step after this story? So how do we invite the users in while we're still reporting? And then how do journalists stay involved? Are we paying attention to what people say, how people react? Besides the neighbor who says, hey, I really liked that, or that really made me mad. I'm guessing all of you have been stopped in the grocery store by somebody saying that really made me mad. Those are the people who know you already and who have a relationship with you and who feel comfortable and empowered to stop you and say, that really made me mad. Are there new ways you could be considering that invite the rest of the community to do that as well, that invite people you're not already reaching to weigh in? Where do we as a journalist have an obligation not to walk away after a story is published, but to pay attention to the reaction and look for and base future story ideas off of what people are saying as they share us, react to us, even fact check us? Next question, who can help us tell a story? So this is one where talking to you guys about this is completely different than talking to larger organizations about this, because a lot of you have this down in terms of actually publishing things from your community and having and using the words and images of people in your community to more fully reflect what you're doing. I think it's really important that we ask who knows more about this than we do. How are we inviting people to, help guide us as we work and also help contribute what they're actually producing themselves? This is, in my experience, a really great way to get younger folks involved because they create content all the time. They're documenting their lives. So the more ways we can find to say, I didn't know that the high school newspaper had an Instagram account. What would happen if we posted some of those? If we made a Facebook album of the Instagram pictures from high school. So in terms of telling a story, think about that, not just today's story about the school lunch situation, but the life of a community. Who is helping document this community? Where are they doing that? And how can we invite them to help us? So, next question. Who is the journalism for? And I'm going to put you to work after we talk about this a little bit, okay? In terms of what you're producing, most of us are very mission-driven in our work. We think that what we do contributes to the health of our community. We think what we do matters, whether it's keeping an eye on people in power in our community or just somebody needs to be documenting what's happening here. We are the record of our community, right? We fill the scrapbooks of our community. What does that look like going forward? I don't have baby books for my kids. Do you guys? Do you keep scrapbooks? My mom's still after me about it. I have Facebook albums. I started copying and pasting from Facebook into a Tumblr just so they'd all be in the funny stories about my kids, just so they'd all be in one place. So what does the scrapbook of your community look like now? And how is what you're doing going to resonate with people who get information in different ways? So who needs this can reply to your whole brand. Who are we serving? And it's probably the whole community. I like to think about this as a funnel. So at the top of your funnel of who is this for is your whole community, and that's completely valid, right? You hope to reach everyone. For specific projects or topics, a lot of times you can get more narrow. This is for parents. This is for people in this particular school. This is an issue that affects this neighborhood. And a lot of times when you think about how well you're serving people, getting specific about who you hope to reach helps. Sometimes it helps to think of a specific face. So I want to tell you about a couple of faces for me. Several years ago, when my kids were really little, I went to a Tuesday morning play group with my toddler, and my husband usually went. And so the moms who were there were surprised to see me. Joy, you're not working today. And I said, no, there's an election tonight. I was the design editor at the time. So there's an election tonight. I'm working at night. And a couple of the moms said, oh, there's an election? You guys, it's a freaking citywide election. And the moms had no idea. And that was a huge wake-up call for me. Do you know how insulated newsrooms are sometimes? And because I know that, my friends are in the newsroom a lot of times, and we all know there's an election. And I'll talk to my neighbors about it. I don't know. I think that it's really easy to overestimate your reach. And I certainly, after that interaction, started to quiz them, frankly, because I'm annoying. But I also started to think a lot about, well, how do you, they know other things. How do they know when registration for soccer opens? They know that. How do they know when the speed bump's going up on their street? They know that. How can you really not know there's an election? So I got much more creative in thinking about how people, it was a wake-up call for me that we can't just publish the way we've always published and assume that we're reaching people, because their parents would have known that there was an election. Stay-at-home moms would have known. The people in this generation didn't know. So what do we need to do to reach them? Because if it's our goal, if we're mission-driven, and it's our goal to help people, empower people to live more engaged civic lives, probably people with a college degree not knowing that there's an election, that's probably a big deal. Okay, more recent example from my newsroom. This is a funny one too. Okay, so just last year, Columbia was considering a ban on plastic bags. Was that just last year? I think it was. So newsroom is we are on it, man. So many different types of stories. We're looking at comparable cities, where have they done this? What's the environmental effect? What would people do? We're talking to people online about it. We had this whole hysterical Facebook thread about what do you use plastic bags for? Good online conversation. And we get all these responses about, I pick up my dog poop, I take my lunch to work, I wrap diapers in them. This one guy on Facebook, you guys, this is totally just an aside. This one guy on Facebook said he lined his porch with plastic bags because it kept birds from nesting there, and he sent us a picture in a Facebook comment of his whole setup on his porch. So, really good online conversation. People are all up in arms on both sides of this issue of is it a good idea to ban plastic bags. Reporter in the newsroom decides to go talk to shoppers. He shows up at Walmart, waiting to be kicked out, but he wasn't kicked out. He got to ask people questions at Walmart for a good while. He came back to me and said, Joy, you're not going to believe it. I spent an hour at Walmart, and most people did not even know this was a thing. No idea that Columbia was considering banning plastic bags. So what we did then was type up a sheet of paper with the key facts. He said, I feel awful because I didn't have anything to offer them. It's like I was asking them to tell me what they thought. They didn't have anything to say because they weren't informed, and so they're not going to benefit from the story. He'd written all these stories about it, right? They're not getting anything from me. So instead, we typed up a quick sheet of facts, and he went back. And then at least when people said, really? Plastic bags? Huh? When people said, huh, he had something to hand them that said, yeah, here it is. Here's how to get more information. Here's how to weigh in if you have strong opinions about it. Here's how to contact me as a reporter so that once you've had a chance to read it, you can tell me what you think. So, where are we assuming that the people who need something are getting it? Because you know what? The people who shop at Trader Joe's and the people who shop at Walmart are probably going to have different opinions about whether it's a good idea to ban plastic bags. And if we are talking only to the people who are our regular audience, maybe we're missing some of them. And maybe it's possible that we have been covering something, and we have inflated our role and think that means everyone's already aware. So, here's my next question for you. Who do you wish you were reaching? And this is in general. In a minute, I'm going to ask you about specific projects. But right now, I want you to write down who you wish you were reaching and who do you struggle to be relevant for. Feel free to list demographics or neighborhoods or ages or anything like that. Also think about specific people if you can. People in your community you wish you were relevant for and that you struggle to reach. So, same as before, write it down yourself. then find someone to talk to. You got 5 minutes. Okay, shall we report back? Seems like good, very, very social conversations happening. So much that no one wants to stop talking, which is adorable. Glad you guys are enjoying your conversations. I'll just keep chatting for a minute to ease into it so everyone can finish their sentence. All right. Who do you wish you were reaching, and who do you struggle to be relevant for? Who's ready? All readers. Haha. Say more about that, please. Can you say more about that? What do you mean? Like, so for everybody, you feel like it's a struggle. For everyone, you cannot rest and assume that you're relevant for everyone, right? Right. Things are changing so fast that you've got to be on your toes about this and continually asking the question, am I still relevant? How well am I serving? Okay, so that's the top of the funnel. Nicely done. The top of the funnel is everyone. Yeah.
I mean, I know you already talked about mothers of small children, but I think that really resonates with me because, you know, we hear from a very informed mother
Right.
who they're like, I don't read the news, but that's like a lifeblood in our communities, and they're also really valuable advertisers, and so we really want more of them.
Right.
Eyeballs on our content.
Right. Yeah. They seem to know what's going on and they value their life and their community, but news, whatever that means, I just thought of a funny story, I'll tell you about that, but I'm gonna let you guys talk first. News, whatever that means, does not seem like it's relevant to them. Okay, what else? Thank you very much. We appreciate that. And who is that? Okay.
Or also, I guess I would say people who are out there in the community and are talking about the newspaper and talking about what they see there or talking about information that they ingest from our product.
Okay, good. People who are valuable to advertisers, high disposable income, want to spend it. Good. Next. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So young professionals who think a newspaper subscription is not essential. That's a cost I can cut. Never mind that it's quite a bargain, but anyway. Right, okay, so again, it's like this idea, it's not that they don't want to be informed, it's this idea that traditional consumption of news and spending dollars on news is not a part of their routines and seems dispensable. Disposable, okay, fancy word there. Next. Busy people. We're all busy, Randy.
Well, that goes to all users.
Right. Isn't that funny? Like, you know, you hear all kinds of people say, I don't have time to read the news, I'm too busy. No, you're not. You are not too busy. It takes 15 minutes a day. Grow up. Maybe less condescendingly. I would say, like, how much time did you spend playing a game on your phone or watching TV or whatever you do when you're in line? Like, read the news when you're in line. Read the news at a stoplight. Maybe that's not the best advice to give. Yeah.
Business people in general, you know, because there were people who were soliciting advertising. And, you know, in some cases, those people are indeed working very hard, working long hours, and they perceive that if their newspaper's not important to them, it's probably not important to anybody anymore, so why advertise?
So, business people, we need relationships with them. And if they don't feel like the news is relevant, they're an especially important demographic. Let me see if I'm getting this right. If they don't feel like it's relevant, the product is relevant, then why would they think it's worth an investment on their part for eyeballs? Because if they're personally not consuming, why would they see value in it? Interesting. Okay. Who else?
As an advertiser, I want to reach people who are likely to be my customers or who influence my customers.
Yep. Customers and people who influence customers. Okay, yeah. Ooh, what does that mean? People who will keep the conversation going.
Well, if you're writing a story, you want people to talk about it, you want people to contribute,
Mm-hmm.
their thoughts,
Uh-huh.
and we'll talk to other people about it.
Right. So what if you're writing a story that you think is important because voting on a tax that will influence roads in a specific neighborhood, right? Do you know how often I hear journalists say, I totally thought people would react to that. I thought people would talk about it. And yet there aren't any comments. You know, nobody's talking about that. Well, do you know that the people you were making that for saw it? And did you invite conversation somehow? So that's the benefit of the funnel. People we hope will keep the conversation going. Well, that's not an answer for your whole community. You probably have some people in your community who keep every conversation going. But it might be that on this specific story, there are people who could really help keep the conversation going and move it forward. Did you invite them to do that? Did you produce it in a way that makes it easy for them to find it and to know what conversations you hope will follow? Can you invite specific people to weigh in or help that? Can you say, ask them maybe to email it out? Ask people to post things. So the next question is, wait, hang on, let me go back. Was there anyone else? Who's the journal? Who are you struggling to reach? Did we get everybody? Nobody said young people. Millennials? Can we just throw the M word in right in the first session here? Don't you want to reach millennials? Are they reading your print product? Mm-hmm. Their habits are different, right? We struggle to reach them. We would like to be relevant so that as their older generations who leave the paper on the coffee table, when they go to their parents' or grandparents' house and they don't still go there and find a paper on the coffee table, what relationship will you have with them? Is Jeff here from Houston? Jeff McNeil? He must not be here yet. I interviewed him years ago, and he's from the Houston Herald, and he talked about his relationship with high school athletes. I can't wait to hear him present tomorrow, because he talked to me 5 years ago about how he would friend high school athletes, and they would tag themselves in the pictures, and that was one way of ensuring that he would be relevant in a specific way to a specific younger demographic. Okay, so how should the journalism reach those people? Maybe your prep sports coverage needs to be on Facebook, and maybe you are in the kind of community where it's not at all creepy for you to be friends with the high school athletes so that you can tag them in it, and each week they'll know when the album is up from Friday night's game. Maybe the people you hope will keep the conversation going could be invited to help you do that. Could be invited to, who in your community has email listservs for neighborhoods or for groups of young moms? What's the Facebook group where young moms are talking? Because boy, when I found those, I reached audiences in different ways. Maybe it's offline. Maybe it's picture day at the park on Saturday morning for soccer, where it seems like half the community is there getting pictures of their kids in their soccer uniforms. Maybe when you know that that's coming up, you think, is there anything those people would really especially appreciate? Is there something I could show up there with that I can put in people's hands? Whether it's a flyer to engage with us on Facebook or a printed product of some sort that you've been really hoping to hear from them about to make sure that they know it. So Facebook groups, just about every community has one. You know what's huge in Columbia? I don't know if you guys, how this scales down. In Columbia, there's a Facebook group called You Know You're From Columbia If or When or something, and it's got like thousands of people. Like last time I checked, more than 20,000 people were in this Facebook group, and it's just crazy. So you want to hear from people who care a lot. They don't all live there anymore. A lot of times it's people who've moved away. But so you have something you want to reach that has to do with like history or nostalgia or community pride, or does anyone remember this teacher who's retiring? Man, you post a link in that group. So where online, where on Facebook have you invested time in finding the places on Facebook that people in your community are talking, and join as many of them as you can? What other social channels are people using to talk about what you're doing or to talk about community life in general? Email lists, and then physical locations. So if people are talking at the gym, is there anything to be done there? Maybe not, but maybe they'd let you put some flyers at the front or tack the week's paper up on the corkboard at the front of the gym. Leave a stack there. Maybe there's something to be done with churches. Maybe there's something to be done. What are some of the other bars? Probably not bars. I don't think we'll go there. I don't know about the lumberyard. Youth sports, oh my goodness. You get permission to hand something out in the stands, and you have an absolute built-in audience. When I hand things out, I like to have some sort of invitation. Here we're sharing information with you, and here's what we invite you to do with us. Help us cover it by doing this. Write something about how proud you are about your kid who's playing. Share your favorite memory from when you were a student here. Ask questions of the reporter here. Suggest stories. Who on the team is an MVP that we should really be taking a look at? So walk around the stands, give people something that they can consume that's especially relevant, designed for them, and also bake into it an invitation of some sort. So, how will we know if the journalism worked? How much time do you spend thinking about what you hope will happen? What we hope will happen has a lot to do with the business end of things. We hope subscriptions will go up. We hope we can hire somebody. In terms of specific products, specific stories, specific topics, what do we hope will happen as a result of our election coverage? What do we hope will happen as a result of our prep sports coverage? If we're relevant to people, if we're providing stories that are of interest, what does that look like? Is it that we want to bring in a certain kind of reader? Is it that we just want more readers? Is it that we will get feedback? Is it that we want evidence of conversation that we helped promote? And are we set up to pay attention to what the audience is doing with what we're doing? So once you've answered the other questions, who's it for? How will we know if it reaches them? Are you tuned in to seeing whether or not it did reach them and whether or not it was relevant for them? This is where having people to help, maybe you put together, you buy pizza and bring in millennials, bring in business people, how and where do you share information? And can you help us figure out how to better serve the community that you represent? There are a lot of people here who have very solid relationships with their communities. And so for me, I'm so excited over the next couple of days to talk about whether those solid relationships, how they're evolving and how they need to still evolve to be sure that as the community changes, you're changing with them. This idea of caring about your audience and the feedback loops and who you're serving is, for me, at the heart of what it means to be social. So let's go back to that party, right? When you are showing up with a kind of a learner's mind, with a social mindset, it's not just about promoting yourself. It's not just about broadcasting. Social channels for me are about meeting people where they are, knowing enough about the party to know how you want to act and what is most needed from you in that situation. What do you have to offer that's valued, that meets the happy marriage of what they're looking for and what you have to offer? And then how do you have an opportunity to listen as well as talk in terms of what people are talking about? So as you think about setting up social channels, this will in part be about effective broadcasting of your own message. Social channels are a great way to get the word out in new ways, to think about, okay, I know we have people on Twitter. What do I have to offer that is consistent with what people in my community do on Twitter? Is my audience there? Is my potential audience there? What do I have to offer that is consistent with what people are already doing there? And then, how will I know if it worked? What are you looking for from Twitter? If you're going to invest some time in Twitter, what is that going to get back for you? Is it about, because you might decide that it's not really worth it. For a lot of publications, they're not seeing nearly the click-through rates on Twitter that they used to. Facebook is still huge. And Facebook is very happy about how huge Facebook is, which is a whole other topic. So how do you know what you hope will happen as you look at these different social channels? Think about how you can meet people there and how you'll measure success. So question number 3 for you, and we're going to end with this. Take a few minutes and write down 3 key projects or topics that your newsroom is going to be working on in the next 6 months. Who will you design that coverage for? Who most needs or wants it? And how will you make sure it reaches those people? So 3 topics. And I'm not going to have you report out to me about this later. If you want to talk to me, that's fine. But right now, we're just going to take these last 5 minutes, and you are going to write 3 projects. Who most needs or wants it? Who are you designing it for? And how are you going to make sure it reaches them? Okay, I'm sensing some restlessness, and we have a break after this. So I'll go ahead and close, and if you want to keep writing, you can keep writing. And if you want to chat with me about it, come find me. But my hope for you over the next 24 hours is that as you learn about a bunch of social strategies and digital tools and talk about the products you're producing, I hope that you can underlie those conversations with some philosophical questions. Consider the strategies you're going to hear and ask yourself, how do these allow me and give me an opportunity to be more social, the conversation at the party, not just talking? How can this allow me to be more social? How can these strategies allow me to meet people where they are and to listen as well as talk? So I will close there, and I look forward to talking to you guys more over the next day. Thank you.